All right. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. This is Shawn here at Zyxel in Anaheim, California. Today we are doing our sort of Nebula tips and tricks, best practices, whatever marketing decided to call it this month. I do this about every other month. And it's just sort of a collection of things that I've found that tends to confuse people when using Nebula. It's also got a number of items in here that we've added either because our customers like you have asked these questions and asked us to add them. I've also gotten a number of slides that have been added based on feedback from our tech support and our sales engineer about things that either um, cause people to call in to need support, or things that are just, maybe not as explained as well as they should be in the interface and need some help. So as we go through, I'll go through all of this, and if you have any questions, go ahead, send them in using either the chat or the Q&A function in the Zoom interface. And depending on what the question is, I'll answer it then, or I will save it to the end of today's presentation. And now we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing to talk about is how Nebula itself is organized. So when you're creating something in Nebula for the first time, you will be asked to create an organization and a site. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is they think the organization, um, excuse me, let me back a little bit. If you are a VAR who are managing multiple customers, one of the most common mistakes people make is they make the organization their own company. So in Nebula, basically each of the different customers that you are going to be managing should be their own organization. And then you would add their locations as sites underneath that, rather than putting all of your customers under one org and each having their own site. And that has to do with how licensing works. So if you put everybody under the same org and then at some point, some but not all of your customers need ProPack, for instance, it will cause you some issues. So you have an unlimited number of orgs that you can create in Nebula, so go ahead and use those. Now, there are cases where you may want to have a customer with multiple orgs for various reasons, and that is absolutely something you should do. So when it comes to licensing, most licenses are done under an organizational basis. So if you need to upgrade a site to ProPack or PlusPack, you don't actually upgrade the site, you upgrade the organization that site is in. So that organization, every device in that org needs to have a license. So obviously, if you've got multiple customers under one org, you're going to have to be upgrading a lot of devices that you don't need to otherwise. I mentioned on the previous slide that sometimes you might want to have more than one org per customer, and that's one of the reasons why you may want to do that. Only certain sites need the Plus or Pro Pack, so you'd want to split them off to minimize the expense in upgrading the orgs to Pro or Plus Pack. Um, One thing to keep in mind is an organization can only have one owner. By default, it's whoever creates the org is the owner of that organization. And we will get into it a little bit later as to um, what access only the owner has access to, or what features only the owner has access to. But keep that in mind that you can transfer org ownership. So if one of your techs, creates the org, you can always have them transfer it over to the master account. And each org has an unlimited number of sites that can be underneath it. So in addition to wanting to split one customer into multiple orgs for licensing reasons, it may just be easier for organizational purposes. You may have, different teams physically handling, different physical geographic locations or whatever it happens to be that makes it easier for you. But again, should always have no more than one customer in one org. So going into licensing here for Plus and Pro Pack. So this is just showing here you've got your account owner. That owner has multiple organizations under them. Those orgs have, one or more sites under each of those. So when you want to upgrade to Plus or Pro Pack, you are doing it at the organization level. And this causes some confusion because you're not buying an organization license, you're buying a device license. So basically, an organization by default is operating in what we call Base Pack, which is the free version of Nebula. And then Plus or Pro Pack are different levels of service at the organizational level. So in order to be able to upgrade from the free version to a paid version, every device in that org needs to have a valid and active license. So how many licenses you need to buy will just depend on how many devices are inside that organization. So some tools here that maybe some people miss out on is you do have the ability to do a bulk site creation. You don't have to manually do it one site at a time. You can go in, tell it how many orgs you want to, or excuse me, how many sites you want to create. And you can choose to just have them in the standard default sort of blank configuration in Nebula, but you can also clone from existing sites in that organization. So you can start them all off with the same settings. You also have the ability to create templates and then upload a template to use for this tool. So now we'll start talking about administrative accounts. So there are different types of administrator accounts that you can have in Nebula. And when you're first creating a new administrator, it will ask you if you want it to be full read only or not. And we'll sort of go through what these different levels have. And then depending on what you choose here, you may be then asked to grant different levels at site access. So the first and default admin account is the owner account. So that is by default whoever created the organizations. So again, an organization can only have one owner, and there are certain features that the owner has that no other level of admin can have. So generally, if you're an MSP or a VAR and you have a lot of customers that you're going to manage, you generally should have one sort of master account that is the owner account that only, top level people in the company have access to. You don't want each of your own techs creating their own orgs and becoming, so you end up with a mishmash of org owners in your company. We have absolutely run into this where a tech gets mad, he quits the company, and now nobody has access to the owner features of that account because that guy has left. You've deleted their email account. You no longer can log into Nebula as an owner. Um, so that's why you want to do it this way. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to create orgs every time you need one. You can create orgs in advance. So you can create as many orgs as you want and just leave them blank and unnamed, org one, org two, org three. And then your admins can go in and rename the orgs as you have customers that need to use those organizations. So the next level of admin, and this is what probably most of your techs are going to be, is just full access. By putting them at the full level, that means that they have access to all sites in that organization, and they have the ability to basically change and edit any settings in that. You also have the option to delegate ownership authority, which grants those admins most of the features that only the owner typically has. Now, if you've delegated ownership authority to a full admin, they still cannot delete organizations. They cannot remove the true ownership account. They cannot remove or change that owner's access to sites under the org. And they cannot transfer ownership of the org from one account to another. But otherwise, they'll have access to all of the same features that the admin does or that the owner does. The next option you'll get here is a read only level. So at read only, the admin has the ability to access all sites in that organization, but only to see how things are configured. They don't have the ability to change any settings. So why would you want this? It may just be, your tier one support. You want them to be able to log in and see how things are configured. You may want to grant access to your customers. So they have somebody in IT, so IT can log in and see what's going on, but can't change anything. But the main reason you would want to use this is by setting them to read only at the org level, it opens up the site level controls, and then you can give much more granular access at the site level. So you can choose which sites they have access to, and we'll get to that in a couple of slides. And then the next level is none at the organization, none. So by default, they can't see or do anything, but they are an admin under that org. And again, the reason you would do this is so you could grant them access only to specific sites. So now we'll move on and talk about site level control. So if you have set an admin to read only or none at the org level for access, it will then open up a secondary menu which lists all of the sites underneath that organization. And then it unlocks a bunch of different levels that you can assign that admin to for that site. So you can mix and match permission levels at a site basis for a user. So a user may have the ability to see settings on some sites, change settings on other sites, and see nothing on other sites. So read only, just like at the org level, is telling you that this admin account can see everything that's been configured on that site, but can't change anything. Monitor only gives them access to the monitor pages in Nebula, but not to the configuration pages. So they can't even see how things are configured, but they can see the monitor tabs and see, hey, is this wireless device currently online or offline? Which SSID is this wireless user connected to, etc. So it might be a level that you would want for like a tier one support personnel to have access to, or an end user themselves to have access to. We also have a level called installer. So the installer has the ability to see all or to access the dashboard, but pretty much only the dashboard in the Nebula interface. But more importantly, it gives them the ability to add devices into that site. Um, and so this would be somebody who's going on site, installing the hardware, but doesn't need to do any configuration. And we added this at request because a lot of you out there are using third-party contracted installers to do the on-site installation. And also because of this, we have added the ability to have this site permission automatically expire after a certain period of time. So if you've got somebody that you've contracted for the next 30 days to do some installs for you, you can have that at the end of the 30 days automatically remove all of their access. So you don't have to manually go in and remember to remove access for your third-party installers. Another tier we have here is called guest ambassador. So this is going to be usually somebody who's on site at the location who works for that customer. When your customer is using some sort of public hotspot that needs somebody to create user accounts or generate vouchers to access public or semi-public Wi-Fi. So this user can log into Nebula to add or remove user accounts that have access through the captive portal, or to generate voucher codes which grant you Wi-Fi access again through a captive portal. So to set up admin access, it's pretty easy. You go in under the organization level to go to your admins tab and create a new administrator. You will be given the option here to put in the name of that person and their email account. So that does need to be a valid email because that's where we will email them links to activate their account. You do have the ability to automatically activate the account should you want to. Um, and you will then choose what level of organizational access they want and whether or not, if you've chosen full, to delegate ownership authority to that user. And again, if you forget what that means, you can hover over the little icon there and it'll give you a little pop-up explaining it to you. So if you have chosen none or read only at the org level access, you will then see a green add button will be added to the interface there for you underneath activate. And that's where you will add the sites that they have access to. So you'll click add, it'll give you a drop down of all of the sites under that organization level. You choose which site you want, and then you choose what level of access you want them to have for that site. And you just keep doing that for each site that you want to grant them some level of access to. So now if you're in a situation where some of your techs have created some orgs and you need to transfer that org over to your master ownership account, or maybe you're selling your company or selling your customer to another VAR, this is where you would go in and transfer ownership. And it's pretty straightforward. You add them as an administrator. So that's the first step. Once you have added that new person who's going to be the new owner as an admin, then you have the ability to go in and transfer the ownership. So you go to organization wide, configure administrators. And this is where you're going to then go through the steps here to do it. So if you haven't already, you created the administrator account for the new owner, or if they're already having an admin account, you can skip that. Then you just go in and you select the admin that you want to become the new owner using the checkbox, and then you click the change ownership button, and it'll take you through a dialog just confirming that you understand that you are transferring ownership and that you have no way to revert this once you have done it. Click yes, and away you go. And it's a very similar process for changing devices. So if you want to move a device from one site to another site, or you're taking it out of one customer's inventory and moving it over to another customer's inventory, you do that basically the same way, only you go under organization-wide settings, license and inventory, and then to the devices tab. And it's the same basic flow. You use the check boxes to select which devices you want to transfer. Click on the actions menu and then choose change organization or change site assignment. Or if you no longer want to manage this device in Nebula, you can always remove it from the organization as well. And then you'll go ahead and choose what org or what site you want to then transfer the device over to. Very similar process for licenses. So if you've accidentally assigned some licenses to the wrong customer, or maybe you've removed a few devices, so you have some extra licenses, so you want to transfer those over to a holding org or to a different customer, same thing, organization-wide settings, license and inventory, but now you would go over to the licenses tab and same exact process. Use the check boxes to select the licenses you want to transfer, choose that you want to change the organization or transfer the license, and just go through the steps there. It's all pretty straightforward. Activating Pro or Plus Pack. Oh, we've got a question. Let me see what that question is. Seth is asking about transferring a lifetime license to a new device. Um, I'm not familiar with the process is on doing that on the lifetime licenses. I am not sure if those are locked into the original device or not. Sorry, I don't know the answer to that. You can always email me about it and I can look into it for you. My email is Shawn R, SHAWNR at Zyxel.com, or just reach out to your salesperson and they can pass that on to me or talk to a Marcus or sales engineer to find out the process. I suspect it's probably something that has to be done through tech support, but I don't know that for sure. But I can definitely check that for you. Continuing on here, activating Pro or Plus Pack. So this is something that causes some confusion for people. So I wanted to add this into our slide here. So as I mentioned earlier, in order to convert an organization from the free version of Nebula to Plus or Pro Pack, every device in the organization needs to have a license assigned to it. But there is one more step that you need to do after that, which tends to get overlooked. So basically, after you've assigned devices to all or licenses to all of your devices, you will then go into your licenses and inventory tab onto the overview tab, and it will show you that your organization is still using the free version of Nebula. And then you will have a button here that says upgrade now. So you can see that's what it looks like. If that license is not, or if that button is not there, that means that some device does not yet have a license assigned to it. So maybe you've got 20 devices, you've loaded 20 licenses into Nebula, maybe you forgot to assign one of those licenses to a device. So if you don't see the upgrade now button, it means some device does not have a license assigned to it. Once you see the upgrade now button, you then need to go through and activate that. So you'll click upgrade now, and then it'll pop up making sure you do want to do that. Confirm yes, you do want to do it. And then it will convert your organization from the free version of Nebula to Plus or Pro. So this is something that a lot of people forget to do. So you've bought the licenses, they've assigned the licenses, but they've never actually activated the licenses and upgraded the organization. So be sure you have done that. One of the nice things with Nebula is almost all of the features that require an extra license have a free trial that you can activate through the Nebula interface. And this is done on a per organization basis. So each organization that you create in Nebula will give you access to a Pro Pack trial for that org, content filtering trials, connect and protect trials, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all there for you to use. And again, it's on a per organization basis. So you just go into organization wide settings, licenses and inventory, and then down to the trial tab. And it will show you which trials are available and whether or not you've used them or not. And if you have activated them, how many days are left on that trial. Now, if you were using that Pro Pack trial, there is something here which causes a little bit of confusion, and that is when you're using the free version of Nebula, there's always this little message at the top of the screen letting you know that you are using the free version of Nebula, and yet letting you know that some features can only be used if you've used or upgraded the org to Plus or Pro. Now, during that 30-day trial of the Pro Pack, you will have access to all of those features, but you will still see this warning message on the top of the screen. And if you go under organization wide licenses and inventory, it will show you are still using the free version of Nebula. So that causes some confusion because you would expect, because I have unlocked those Pro Pack features, it would show Pro Pack trial here or something like that, and it doesn't. You still technically are using the free version of Nebula. You have not actually paid to upgrade it, which is why you see those features. To verify that the Pro Pack trial is active and you still have days left on it, you would click over to the trial tab, and then you would see here Pro Pack trial is in progress. This is the last day that that Pro Pack trial is going to be valid for. And if for some reason you want to end the trial early, you can always deactivate it here. So another feature we have in Nebula is something called hardware locking. And this is how it was when we originally launched Nebula. This is how Nebula worked. Hardware was locked. So you would assign the device to an org in a site using the QR code, and then you would not be able to move that device without logging into Nebula and manually moving the device from one site to one org. A lot of our larger MSP customers asked us to change that behavior, and instead they wanted the ability. So if they need to move a device from one site to another site, they simply need to scan the QR code a second time and assign it to the new site, new work. So that is how Nebula today works. It assumes that if you have access to the QR code for the device, that you are the physical owner of that device and that you can move it from one site to another just by scanning the QR code and reassigning it to a new site or a new work. Now, there are plenty of reasons why you may not want to have that feature active. It's happened once or twice. It doesn't happen too often, but we have had it once or twice where, for instance, one of our customers, as an MSP, they've installed some hardware at the customer location. And then somebody from the management team or the IT team was looking at the hardware that was installed, saw the QR code, scanned the QR code, and used that to take possession of the hardware. So they moved it from the Oregon site that you as the VAR had assigned it to, and had moved it to a new Oregon site that they created using the Nebula, the Nebula app or the Nebula web interface. So that is something you can turn off. It just depends on how you like to do business. We do know a lot of you larger MSPs out there and VARs. One of the first steps in troubleshooting a problem is just to remove the hardware from the site and swap out new hardware, and then take the existing hardware back to a lab where it'll be tested to verify if the hardware was actually bad or not. So that's the first step in troubleshooting. So because of that, they're constantly moving hardware from one customer or one site to the lab and then back to another customer or site. They'll use, if the hardware is not defective, they'll then put that into a pool to be drawn from the next time they need to do a hardware swap. So to turn off this feature, you just go to organization-wide settings. Under the org settings, there is something called device ownership takeover. You can simply toggle that on, and that will then prevent this from being able to be used. Something that was added, I think it was last spring, is the ability to aggregate alerts. So by default, alerts are done on a per device basis, but you can choose to aggregate them. So what does that mean? So like one of the most common alerts that we get in Nebula that people set up is the ability to notify you if a device goes offline for a certain period of time. So that's really nice to know, right? You get a notification, hey, this switch has gone offline, this access point has gone offline. So you can take some proactive measures to figure out why that device went offline. Did somebody on site unplug it? Did it get disconnected from the Ethernet, etc.? The downside of this is if a customer, for instance, loses power or their ISP someone's cut the fiber from their ISP to the building, suddenly every device in that org is going to go offline at the same time. So if you have 20 devices on that customer site, you will get 20 notifications of devices going offline, and it can be very, very annoying. So you can turn on alert aggregation, and basically it will pool all alerts within a 5-minute window and send you one push notification for all of those alerts rather than sending you a single alert for each device. So to turn this on, you go to the site-wide settings, configure, and under the alert settings for the site, you can choose to enable alert aggregation. We can skip that. Another area where there's some confusion is where it comes to IP binding or static DHCP, whichever term you want to use. So there are two different ways of doing this in Nebula. And this is assuming that you are using a Nebula managed gateway, so one of our gateway devices. So the first one and the easiest one is going to the client page. So under the client page in Nebula, it shows you all your wireless and wired clients and various bits of information about them, including the IP address that's currently been assigned to that device. So you can go in there, you can click the checkbox next to a device, and you can choose the reserve IP function. And from that point forward, every time that device connects to the network, they will be assigned that same IP address that they currently have. So that's a way basically to freeze the IP for that device. The other way of doing this is by going into the interface page for your Zyxel Nebula managed router and going to the DHCP table. So you can go in there and you can specify the MAC address for a device, the IP address for a device, and going forward, every time that device connects to the network and uses DHCP, it will be given that IP address. So these are two different ways of doing this. So why are there two different ways? Well, the first one is the client page is the easy way to do it. You don't need to know the MAC address of the device. You just need to know the device's name, and it will simply reserve the IP address that's already been assigned to that device. If for some reason you want to manually specify a very specific IP address other than the one it already has, you can't do that through the client page. You have to do that through the interface page. Now, the downside of this is that you do have to know the MAC address for the device. So, you may have to go to the client page first, have it display MAC addresses for connected devices, and copy and paste that then into your interface page. So this gives you more flexibility, but it's a little bit more manual process. Client page is the easier way to do it, but you have less flexibility. Now, a question we get is, well, what happens if someone's already done this on the client page and then I go into the interface page and set it up? Interface page trumps the client page policy. So this will always take precedence over this. We've got a number of ports on here that you need to have. Basically, the Nebula devices need to be able to reach out through your firewall to the internet. So these ports need to be open. You don't have to do any port forwarding, but the Nebula device needs to be able to send traffic on these ports outbound through your firewall. And we have run into cases where people really strictly lock down their network. And these ports are blocked from outbound traffic. So if you're one of those people that really locks down your network, you do need to open these ports. So TCP ports 6667 and 4335. These need to be opened to allow communication using the netconf protocol between the device and our cloud management platform. We also need you to open up TCP port 443, so HTTPS, for able to use the Nebula web portal to do firmware upgrades and some other stuff like that. And then all devices need to be able to reach out on UDP port 123. This is an NTP server, so it needs to be able to reach our NTP server. And this is because of timestamps used for the encryption of the data that is being sent from the Nebula device to the Nebula cloud. And then if you are using our VPN functionality, UDP ports 4500 and 500 need to be opened in order to use VPN. So something that causes some questions here is the max output power setting in Nebula. So if you go under configure access points radio settings, you will see settings here where you can set the output power for the radio. So a common area of confusion is people will set this to say the maximum, which is 30 dBm. And then when they go into the monitoring tab, it will show a lower power output value for the device's radio. So why is that? And the answer to that is this is a generic setting for the maximum output. So this will cap output power, so it can't go beyond whatever setting you have set here. Your device may not actually be able to achieve that. So you may have set this to 30, but maybe the device only has a maximum output power of 26 dBm. So for that reason, you will see 26 on the actual setting or the actual status page, even though you have set a higher number. Also, on top of that, for 5 and 6 gigahertz products, depending on what channel you are using, there may be limitations to the maximum output power set by the FCC. So we can't let you exceed those power output requirements, even if the radio for your device technically allows it. So if you need higher output power, you may need to change the channel that you are using in order to be able to do that. So this may seem obvious to you, but if you're using multiple SSIDs, each SSID needs to usually be on its own separate VLAN. The point of running multiple SSIDs is to allow different types of users access to different network resources based on the SSID they connect to. So for instance, a company SSID and a guest SSID. Or maybe you've got an SSID for the warehouse, an SSID for your sales team, an SSID for your IT team. Lots of different reasons you may want to do this. Now, if for some reason you cannot do VLANs on your network, we can still have at multiple SSIDs and still have segregated access to a certain level. So for instance, one of the things we can do is most of our access points can do DHCP themselves, separate from the DHCP from your gateway, on a per SSID basis. So essentially, you're turning one SSID into a NAT router. So those users are on their own subnet separate from the rest of the network, getting them greater isolation from the rest of the network. We also have a feature called intra-BSS blocking. And with intra-BSS blocking, basically the access point refuses to forward traffic from the client device to the local area network unless the MAC address of the device they are trying to access has been added to a whitelist. So for instance, if you're providing guest access, you may only provide them the MAC filter for the WAN connection. So they can only have outbound traffic to the WAN, not any LAN resources. So you will need to manually enter the MAC address for each device you want users on that SSID to have access to. So maybe in addition to internet, maybe you want to give them access to a network printer or a shared file server, something like that. You can do that by adding each of those in there and whitelisting them. So one thing that's key, then something that causes some confusion, is this layer 2 isolation feature, or is only filtering outbound traffic from the client. It is preventing the client from accessing or sending traffic directly to something on the LAN unless it's been whitelisted. However, you may have devices on your LAN that send out multicast traffic. So all multicast traffic from that device will be forwarded to your client devices because we don't know which multicast traffic needs to be filtered. So because of that, if somebody puts a sniffer on their device, even though you've got layer two isolation enabled, they still be able to sniff out through multicast packets, other devices that are on your network. So they may be able to see those devices, know those devices are there, know the names of those devices, but they won't be able to send traffic to those devices. When it comes to troubleshooting wireless LAN issues, take a look at channel utilization. The feedback I've got from our tech support team is this is often telling you everything you need to know about why your wireless users are having wireless connectivity issues. So this should be the first thing you check. You've got a wireless user complaining about the quality of their connection. Find out what channel they are connected to or what band they are connected to, and then go here under the channel utilization graph and take a look there. So very often the reason they are having issues is because they're connected to 2.4 and 2.4 is the channel utilization is just swapped. You've got too many devices sharing the same spectrum, and that's why you're having those issues. So that's the first thing you should almost always check. When it comes to roaming, there's a lot of confusion about how roaming works on wireless networks. And the short version of it is the client device is what determines roaming by default. So it's the client device that determines how often to scan the environment to see if there's another access point nearby with better quality signal. It is the client device that determines how strong that signal is before the switch to a different AP to connect to. So that is all dependent on the client. So the behavior you see will be dependent on the client, not the access point. So, for instance, Apple products are extremely famous for being a little too sticky and not wanting to roam between access points for whatever reason. That's how Apple has set it up. Another problem that you often run into is that the wireless device has a very strong signal from the access point, but your access point isn't actually able to receive the signals back from the client. And the reason for that is just because an access point is oftentimes broadcasting 1 watt or higher output power, but your mobile device is only broadcasting out at 30 milliwatts or 50 milliwatts because it's trying to preserve battery power, right? It's trying to balance Wi-Fi connectivity with not draining your Wi-Fi battery. So because of that, it's very possible to have 4 or 5 bars of signal showing on your client device, but the signal from your client device can't make it back to the access point. So your client won't know that the AP isn't seeing that signal, so it thinks it's just fine staying where it is. So there are some tools in Nebula you can enable which helps reduce this sort of issue. One of that is turning on what's called assisted roaming, 802.11 KNV. So if the client device supports assisted roaming, it allows the client device to communicate with the AP and helps smooth over that process and have better visibility of what's going on the network. So it can be more active as far as jumping between access points when needed. The other thing we have here is smart steering. So with smart steering, we can basically force the wireless client to disconnect if the signal strength at the access point is below a certain threshold that you have set. With the hope being that if you have kicked off the device, it will then do a new scan and realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should try connecting to this other access point which has a better signal. Again, it still depends on what the client device's algorithm is that it uses for roaming, but this can help. So to get to that, you go to the configure access point settings, and then you go to your radio settings and enable the smart steering function. So you notice here where it says optimization aggressiveness. This basically is telling it um, how long to keep that client device kicked off before re-allowing them to associate with the same access point that you just kicked them off of. So generally you want to leave that on high or standard, but you may just have to tweak it depending on, your particular RF environment and the types of clients you are using on that environment. Now, by default, we set that setting to negative 70 dBm. So feedback from our sales engineer is you probably want to tweak those settings. So he has suggested the following settings as a starting point, and then you may need to tweak it again based on your particular RF environment and the particular behavior of the clients that are on that network. So he suggests setting 2.4 gigahertz to negative 69, 5 gigahertz clients to negative 72, and 6 gigahertz clients to negative 75. So a cool feature we have here on our switches that tends to get overlooked is automatic VLAN. And there are two different ways of doing automatic VLAN in Nebula. And basically what automatic VLAN does is instead of doing port-based VLAN, finding out what port the device is connected to and then putting that port onto a specific VLAN, Nebula can look at the OUI of the MAC address, and if it matches, automatically assign that device, regardless of what port they're plugged into, to a specific VLAN. So the most common way of doing this is for voice VLAN, right? You've got a bunch of VoIP phones that are being plugged in. They're probably all from one vendor. That vendor has the same OUI on all of those. So you can just put that in, and Nebula will be smart enough to see, oh, someone's plugged in one of those voice phones on this port. I will go ahead and assign that device to the voice VLAN because I know that is a VoIP product. So that's the main way. And it's in our system under voice VLAN. You simply enable it, put in the VLAN and the priority for that VLAN you want to assign the device to. And then you choose OUI for the dropdown for how to assign the VLAN. And then it will break out a list here where you can put in those OUIs, and it is done via a dropdown. So we've got the OUIs for all of the most popular voice products that are out there. So you can simply go through and add as many or as few of those as you want. So that's the easiest way to do it. Now, you may want to do the OUI VLAN assignments for something other than voice products. So for that, we have a second way of doing it, which is vendor ID based VLAN. Basically the same thing. And so this can be stacked on top of voice VLAN. So you can have voice VLAN for your VoIP phones, and you can set up additional ones for, say, your access points or some other network device that you want to use this type of feature for. That's called vendor ID VLAN in the interface. So you simply enable that, and then you manually type in the OUI for the product that you want the matching to take place for. And again, you set the priority and VLAN assignment for that device. And you can add multiples in there. Storm control. So storm control is a feature of our switches, which basically looks for a device creating a whole bunch of packets all at once, flooding the interface of the device. So this is something most of you turn on through the Nebula interface. The problem we have run into is the default setting in Nebula is probably too sensitive for most of you. Basically, if it sees 100 packets per second or more on a port, it will create a broadcast storm alert and registered an entry in the logs. And so we've had a lot of customers complain there's just too many of these entries in the logs. I'm trying to scan the logs looking for some problem, and there's just too many of these I've got to filter out. So feedback from our sales engineers, you probably want to change the default value to 200 or 300 packets per second. So you do that by going to configure, switches, switch ports, storm controls enabled, and then just change the default value from 100 to 200 or 300. And again, you can tweak that based on what's going on that particular network. We're almost done, people. Just a few more slides left. Um, Zyxel has an AI chatbot function that's in Nebula. Um, I myself am not a huge fan of AI chatbots in general. Um, but I have found the Nebula one to be really nice, especially when it comes for finding documentation. So you will see this little chat window in the bottom right of the screen, pretty much anywhere in the Nebula interface. You click on that, it pulls up the chatbot. It introduces itself and asks you basically what you want. So you can type in the thing that you are looking for access to, or something you want to learn more about, and it will spit out, a typical AI summary um, as best it can. Now, one of the problems with the AI summary is the formatting is kind of wonky, and it's technical stuff that's it's being reduced to a little chat window. So I generally just skip that entirely. But what our chat does is, in addition to providing you the little summary or what it thinks the answer is it provides direct links to our documentation as to where it pulled that data from. So what I personally have found is, for me at least, the best way to use this is to not ask a question. Don't type in a typical chatbot prompt, but just type in the name of the feature that you're looking for the documentation for, or you're trying to learn more about. So in this case, I typed in static DHCP. And then I go directly here to the sources, and it will link me directly into the Zyxel documentation. And I find this is a great tool because Zyxel has all sorts of documentation scattered all over the web. Nebula does have a documentation page, but we've got PDF documents for the device itself. We've got PDF documents for Nebula. We've got support notes. We've got things that have been posted to our support pages on our website. So rather than sifting through all of those, let the AI sift through all of those and provide you direct links to where what you're looking for has been documented, and then I go in and actually read the documentation, which is normally formatted a lot better and is a lot more comprehensive. And with that, guys, that is the end of today's presentation. So if you had some more questions, some topics I didn't cover, go ahead and send those in now using chat or Q&A. I will stay here for another minute or two to see if anybody has any additional questions to send in. My email is up there on the screen, ShawnR@Zyxel.com. Feel free to give me suggestions, feedback, additional topics you'd like to see added to this webinar in the future. And of course, you can always reach out to your salesperson with anything. For any questions, they can always forward it to the sales engineer or forward it to me if they don't know the answer. And then just to let you guys know, all of our webinars, or most of them, when we remember to push the button to record, are archived and uploaded to our YouTube page. So if you've missed something, or you joined late and you want something earlier, or you want to, see a webinar that we haven't done for a few months, just go to youtube.com. The North America presentations are all under Zyxel America channel, I believe is what it's still called, Zyxel America channel or Zyxel North America. We have two channels there, one for channel products and one for our service provider products. So you can go through there, find the webinars. We also have new product announcements, best practices videos, product launches, unboxing videos, all that type of YouTube stuff on there. So that's where you can find that here. And then if you want to find out, what sort of webinar content is being published in France in the French language, you can always go to one of our European other pages to find out that sort of info. I don't see any questions. Seth, thank you for your comments. And again, feel free to email me or ask your salesperson about the comment. Oh, I do have something under Q&A. My bad. It was hidden from me. So I think Paul just answered your question. Where can you access this recording? It'll be up on our YouTube page, probably no later than tomorrow afternoon, and probably a lot quicker than that. And the last time I did that is on our YouTube page already. The other was just a comment thanking me. So thank you, Wayne, for your nice comments. And I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Again, if something does come up that you need, feel free to email me or just reach out to your salesperson. Thank you, and I hope I see you at one of our future webinars. We do these almost every Thursday or Tuesday. Thank you.